Okay, so let's go ahead and try this out. I'm going to review some examples regarding population and population of interest. So discussing what exactly this is and clarifying that a bit. I've decided to use a whiteboard just because it makes it easier for me to draw. You'll see me going back and forth depending on the content. So let's start off with what people usually think when we're discussing population. So usually when we're discussing population, now you're going to see I'm not the best drawer, but normally people think, I'm not even going to try to draw the different continents, but they think we're talking about the entire world, right? This would be the world. And we're not, and by world I mean all the people in our world, right? The population of the world, population of the US, right? So we're not even talking about that when we use population in this class. When we use the word population, we're usually referring to population of interest. Now keep in mind, you'll hear it used this way. So every time you've heard people in classes you've taken say the population in the study or anything like that, when they use that word population, usually if they were talking about a study, a research study, they're referring to the population of interest. Now, a population of interest can be, let's see if I could draw this. That's supposed to be a baby. Can you tell that's a baby? Well, that's supposed to be a baby. So it could be babies. Like, let's say we're interested in all 0 to 2-year-olds. And actually, that's a big span. You probably wouldn't focus on that large of a span unless you were interested in looking at development over those 2 years, right? So that might be your population of interest. Just all infants, newborns, from 0 to 2 years of age. And we're interested in studying that age group, right? Or maybe we're interested in people, and I should not have tried drawing this stuff, right? So this is a bike. So people who bike to work, maybe that's your population of interest. You're just interested in people who bike to work and the possible health benefits of biking to work, right? So keep that in mind, that the population of interest is that specific group we're interested in focusing on for that study, right? So let me move this over. So let's say we hit a population of interest. And let me draw a bunch of dots. And these are going to represent people who bike. And I choose a different color. So I'm going to actually write this out. Blue, bike. I'm going to do red for run. People who run, not to work, just people who do this. Let me make these dots bigger so you can see them. I'm going to have people who weightlift. Remember, each of these dots represents a different person. And let's see, do I have any other colors left? I have used yellow's hard to see. I was trying to save black, but I'm going to go ahead and use it. People who walk for exercise. So if you saw this, and I said I'm studying all these people, what would you say the population of interest is? Just your best guess, right? So people might guess, well, people who do exercise, people involved in some kind of sport, maybe not sport, right? But people who exercise. And in that case, you would be right. I'm interested in studying people who get some exercise in, whether they bike, run, weightlift, and walk. I don't care which one they do. I just want to I want to study people who get exercise in during the week, right? And that would be my population of interest. My population of interest would be just people who exercise. Now, keep in mind that to get a sample, it doesn't mean I get all of these people because there's just too many people who do this kind of activity. To get a sample, well, actually, let me take a step back. A sample is a smaller group of that larger group of interest. So this might be your population of interest, but there's no way you could recruit all those people. It would take too much time, too much money. How can you recruit people? Let's say you were interested in people who exercise in the US. How could you recruit everybody in the US? That would be impossible. So you would take a sample of all people who exercise, and for you to be able to draw a causal conclusion, to be able to take your findings, well, actually, not so much to draw a causal conclusion, but to be able to generalize your findings from your sample to the population, you have to have a random sample. So I'll go over that again in a second. But just remember, ideally, your sample is a random sample, meaning that everybody, let me change to a different color, everybody here has an equal chance of randomly being chosen for your sample. Now let's say this is what your sample looked like. Well, that would be an issue. You have mostly runners. You have a person that bikes, a person that weightlifts, a person that let's get a walker in there, a person that walks. So that you have an overrepresentation of people who run. So it looks like probably you didn't sample correctly if you have so many more runners than you have other types of people, right? So that any conclusions you draw from here, right? Anything you find in your research study will not represent what you would expect here for the population of interest because your sample doesn't represent everybody in that population of interest, right? So you would want to see something instead. I don't know, I drew a yellow line. There was no yellow types of participants. I have blue. I have the walkers in there. Wait, isn't walkers what they call those zombies in that TV show? Anyways, so not those kind of walkers, people who exercise by walking. So, okay, so you have a representation where you randomly sampled from the population of interest, and you see by looking at it, you do more than look at it, but it looks like pretty good, right? So anything you find now with this new sample that has a random sample from the population of interest, you can take those findings and apply them to the population of interest. So that's what we mean by generalize. It means I could take my findings here with a small sample of the full population of interest and draw some conclusions regarding what this might look like for the population of interest. So let me just get more concrete. So for example, if I said people who exercise tend to have, I don't know, they tend to live longer, let's say that. Well, in my random sample, I looked at people and just checked how long they lived, checked their age, until what age did they live to. Maybe I'll get, on average, let's say I got an 80 for my sample, right? And I had a good sample, a sample that was representative, that randomly sampled from the population of interest. Well, then that means if I can generalize this finding here to the population of interest. So if my sample, if most people are living on average till 80 years of age, then I can likely assume this is the case for everybody who gets some exercise in throughout the week, right? So keep in mind, just to summarize, population of interest, everybody I'm interested in studying. So it's a group that you're interested in studying. My sample is a subset of that group, right? So it's a subset. We'll call it pop of interest, just for short. So the sample is a subset. And if we want to generalize or apply our findings from our sample to the population of interest, then we should have a random sample. In other words, each person from the population of interest should have had an equal opportunity of being chosen for a sample. Those are ideals. Keep that in mind. Yes, that is super difficult. So imagine if my population of interest is this, all people who exercise in the US, then you literally have to figure out, how do I find everybody in the US who exercises who exercises, and how do I contact them, right? So you would have to have like some database, some access to everybody who exercises, and some way of knowing that. And then you would have to randomly sample from that database, right? So as you can imagine, that's pretty difficult. Now let's say I wanted to do CSUN students instead. CSUN students, I feel like that should be in red. CSUN students who exercise. Well, that's doable, right? So we have a database of all your contact info. When you enrolled in this university, we have that information. So we could, in that case, literally randomly choose people from the database of students and then contact them. Now, figuring out if they exercise or not, that's more difficult, right? But just remember, we have to randomly sample from the population of interest if we want to draw conclusions from our sample, from the study we conducted with the sample, and apply those conclusions to the full population of interest. All right, so let me know if you have questions. I have office hours. Please come see me. I'm not that scary. If you want to talk about anything, grad school, life, the meaning of life, about current events, I'm happy to talk about that. So just keep that in mind. Let me know if you have any questions.